Have you ever stood in a house and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature? A sudden, inexplicable weight in the air, a feeling of being watched when you know you're completely alone? We build homes to be our sanctuaries, our fortresses against the outside world. They are the backdrop to our lives, the silent witnesses to our joys, our sorrows, our most private moments. But what happens when that sanctuary is violated? What happens when the walls themselves seem to hold a memory of something terrible, a darkness that refuses to fade with time? What if the greatest threat isn't outside your door, but is already inside, woven into the very fabric of the place you call home? Tonight, we're not just telling ghost stories. We're embarking on a journey. We're going to pull back the peeling wallpaper and pry up the creaking floorboards of 4 of the most infamous addresses in the United States. These are more than just haunted houses, they are landmarks of fear, places where history and horror have become so intertwined that it's impossible to separate one from the other. We'll travel from the sun-drenched, Gothic streets of New Orleans to the quiet, unassuming suburbs of Long Island. We'll explore a sprawling, chaotic mansion born of grief and superstition, and we'll stand in the silent rooms of a home where an entire family was lost to a crime that remains a chilling mystery to this day. These are places that have inspired books, movies, and countless nightmares. They've been the subject of intense paranormal investigations and have become destinations for those brave enough to seek out their own ghost adventures. But beyond the legends and the sensationalism, there are real stories. Stories of tragedy, of violence, of human cruelty, and profound sorrow. And the question that hangs in the air like a persistent fog is this: do the spirits of the past truly linger in these places, or are these homes simply powerful monuments to our own collective fears and fascination with the unknown? So, turn down the lights. Settle in. We're about to unlock the doors to 4 of America's most terrifying haunted houses and explore the dark truths that lie within. Our journey begins in the French Quarter of New Orleans at a beautiful home with a truly monstrous secret. Welcome to the LaLaurie Mansion. To the casual tourist strolling down Royal Street in New Orleans, the building at number 1140 is a grand and imposing sight. Its elegant balconies, intricate ironwork, and stately presence make it one of the most photographed buildings in the French Quarter. It looks like a relic of a bygone era of Southern opulence and high society. But if you look closer, if you listen to the whispers of the locals, you'll learn that this house has a history so dark, so steeped in human suffering, that many people will cross the street to avoid walking directly in front of it. This is the LaLaurie Mansion, a place where unspeakable acts were committed and where the echoes of that pain are said to still cry out from behind its shuttered windows. To understand the haunting, you must first understand the woman who gave the mansion its infamous name. Madame Delphine LaLaurie. Born Marie Delphine McCarty in 1787, she was a prominent member of New Orleans Creole elite. She was wealthy, intelligent, and by all accounts, beautiful and charming. She moved through the city's high society like a queen, hosting lavish parties that were the talk of the town. She married 3 times, each time to a man of considerable status, further cementing her position in the city's upper echelon. Her 3rd husband, Dr. Louis LaLaurie, was a much younger physician, and it was with him that she purchased the property on Royal Street in 1831, building the magnificent 3-story mansion that stands there today. Outwardly, the LaLauries were the picture of success and sophistication. Their home was the center of social life, filled with music, fine food, and the most influential people in New Orleans. But beneath this glittering facade, a dark and disturbing pattern was beginning to emerge. Rumors began to circulate about Madame LaLaurie's treatment of the people she enslaved. In that era, the mistreatment of slaves was tragically common, but the stories about Delphine LaLaurie suggested a level of cruelty that shocked even the sensibilities of the time. There were whispers of starvation, of brutal punishments for the smallest infractions, and of a strange, unsettling demeanor that would shift in a heartbeat from charming hostess to cold-hearted tormentor. The whispers became a public scandal with one horrifying incident. According to accounts from the time, a neighbor witnessed a young slave girl, a child named Leah, plummet from the roof of the mansion while trying to escape a whip-wielding Madame LaLaurie. The little girl had been brushing Delphine's hair and had accidentally hit a snag. In a fit of rage, Delphine chased her through the house, up the stairs, and onto the roof, where the terrified child either fell or jumped to her death in the courtyard below. The authorities were called, and the Laloris were fined and forced to sell 9 of their enslaved people. However, in a twisted display of influence and deceit, Delphine had a relative buy them back and secretly return them to 1140 Royal Street, where their suffering would continue hidden away from the public eye. The true, unadulterated horror of what was happening inside the Lalaurie mansion remained a secret until the night of April 10, 1834. A fire broke out in the kitchen of the home. When neighbors and fire marshals rushed to help, they were met with a strange resistance from the Lalauries, who seemed reluctant to let anyone inside. In the chaos, some brave citizens broke down the doors to the slave quarters, which were barred from the outside. They were expecting to find people huddled in fear from the fire. What they found instead was a scene from a nightmare, a secret attic of torture and human experimentation that would forever stain the history of New Orleans. The accounts from that night are difficult to read, let alone recount. They found men and women chained to the walls, their bodies horrifically mutilated. Some were confined in tiny, cage-like contraptions that forced them into agonizing positions. Some had limbs that were broken and reset at bizarre angles, making them look like human crabs. One woman had her mouth stuffed with animal feces and her lips sewn shut. Another man had a hole drilled into his head, with a stick nearby, seemingly for stirring his brain. The scene was so gruesome, so beyond comprehension, that the people who discovered it were physically ill. They were not just victims of punishment. They were the subjects of sadistic, medical-like experiments, carried out by a woman who was celebrated as a pillar of society. When word of the discovery spread through the city, the public's admiration for Madame Lalaurie turned to a righteous fury. An enraged mob descended upon the mansion, destroying everything they could get their hands on, intent on delivering their own brand of justice. But Delphine and her husband had already escaped. They fled to the waterfront and boarded a schooner, vanishing before they could be held accountable for their crimes. It's believed they eventually made their way to Paris, where Delphine Lalaurie reportedly died years later, never having faced justice for the atrocities she committed. And so, the house on Royal Street was left behind, a silent monument to her evil. The fire was extinguished, the victims were removed, some of whom died shortly after being rescued, and the building was eventually repaired. But a place that has witnessed such profound agony does not simply forget. The paranormal stories surrounding the Lalaurie mansion began almost immediately. People reported hearing phantom screams of pain echoing from the empty house at night. Apparitions were seen in the windows, and those brave enough to enter reported feeling an overwhelming sense of despair and dread, particularly in the attic where the torture chamber was found. Over the decades, the house passed through many hands. It was a public high school, a conservatory of music, a bar, an apartment building, and even a furniture store. But no owner or tenant seemed to stay for long. The paranormal activity was relentless and often terrifying. Residents reported being physically assaulted by an unseen force, waking up with scratches on their bodies. Objects would fly across rooms, and strange, unsettling odors would manifest and then vanish without a trace. One of the most frequently reported spirits is that of the young girl, Leah, who fell from the roof. Her small, sad apparition is said to be seen in the courtyard, a constant reminder of the cruelty that led to her death. But the most terrifying presence is believed to be that of Madame Lalaurie herself. Her ghost, described as a tall, elegant woman with a terrifying glare, has been seen stalking the halls of her former home. She is often felt on the second-floor balcony where she would stand and watch the city, and her phantom touch has been reported as an ice-cold grip of malice. Some paranormal stories even claim that she has physically attacked investigators and psychics who have dared to challenge her presence, her spirit seemingly as sadistic and possessive in death as she was in life. In the early 2000s, actor Nicolas Cage famously bought the mansion, drawn to its dark history. He spoke of the bad mojo of the house and held seances there. But like so many others, his ownership was short-lived, and he lost the property to foreclosure. Today, The LaLaurie Mansion is privately owned and not open to the public, but that doesn't stop the tour groups from congregating outside, day and night, to stare up at its windows and recount the tales of horror. The LaLaurie Mansion forces us to confront a disturbing question. Is a haunting simply the echo of a past event, or can the sheer force of human evil permanently poison a location? The pain inflicted within those walls was not a fleeting moment of violence. It was sustained, systematic, and born of a deep-seated sadism. It's as if that energy, that malevolence, seeped into the very wood and stone of the building. When people report feeling watched or hearing screams, are they experiencing a residual haunting, a playback of past events, or are they interacting with the intelligent, conscious spirits of the victims and perhaps even the spirit of their tormentor? Still trapped in a cycle of suffering and rage? The LaLaurie Mansion stands as a chilling testament to the idea that some houses aren't just haunted by ghosts, they're haunted by the worst parts of human nature. From the opulent, Gothic horror of New Orleans, our journey now takes us north, to the quiet, all-American suburbs of Long Island, New York, to a house that, on the surface, looks like any other family home. A large, Dutch colonial with distinctive quarter-moon windows that look like a pair of watching eyes. This is 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville. It's an address that has become synonymous with the term haunted house. A name that instantly conjures images of terror, demonic possession, and a story so sensational it has captivated and polarized the public for nearly half a century. This is the home of the Amityville Horror. Unlike the LaLaurie Mansion, where the horror was discovered after decades of secrecy, the story of Amityville begins with a single, brutal, and very public act of violence. In the pre-dawn hours of November 13, 1974, a 23-year-old man named Ronald "Butch" DeFeo Jr. took a high-powered rifle and systematically murdered his entire family as they slept in their beds. He killed his father, Ronald DeFeo Sr., his mother, Louise, and his 4 younger siblings, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. 6 people, all shot in their beds, in a crime of shocking brutality that rocked the peaceful suburban community. The investigation was bizarre from the start. All 6 victims were found lying face down in their beds with no signs of a struggle. Neighbors heard no gunshots, which was incredible given the power of the rifle used. And strangest of all, a toxicology report found no sedatives in the victims' bodies. How could 6 people be shot in a relatively small house without a single one waking up or crying out? The police were baffled. Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s story kept changing. At first, he claimed he discovered the bodies after coming home from work. Then he blamed the murders on a mob hitman. Finally, he confessed, allegedly telling detectives, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." His motive remained murky. He spoke of hearing voices, of a dark presence in the house that compelled him to kill. He was eventually convicted on 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, a sentence he served until his death in 2021. The house on Ocean Avenue, now the scene of a gruesome mass murder, sat empty for over a year. The bloodstains were cleaned, the furniture was sold, but the story lingered. And then, in December of 1975, a new family decided to make it their home. George and Kathy Lutz, along with Kathy's 3 young children from a previous marriage, bought the house for a bargain price of $80,000, fully aware of its dark history. They believed it could be their dream home. They were wrong. Their stay at 112 Ocean Avenue would last only 28 days, a period of escalating terror that would become the basis for one of the most famous paranormal stories of all time. According to the Lutzes, the paranormal activity began almost immediately. On the day they moved in, they had a priest, Father Ray Pecoraro, come to bless the home. As the priest sprinkled holy water in one of the upstairs bedrooms, the former bedroom of Mark and John Matthew DeFeo allegedly heard a deep, masculine voice command, "Get out!" He also claimed to have been slapped by an unseen hand and later developed inexplicable, painful blisters on his hands. He warned the Lutzes to stay out of that particular room, but that was only the beginning. Over the next 4 weeks, the family reported a litany of terrifying phenomena. A strange, persistent cold seemed to grip the house, even with the heating cranked up. Swarms of flies would appear out of nowhere in the middle of winter. Strange odors, sometimes like cheap perfume, other times like foul excrement, would waft through the rooms. Greenish-black slime would ooze down the walls and from the keyholes. Kathy Lutz began having vivid nightmares about the murders and started levitating in her sleep. She also discovered red welts on her body with no explanation. George Lutz's personality underwent a drastic and frightening change. He became sullen, angry, and obsessed with the fireplace, spending hours staring into the flames. He stopped bathing, his health deteriorated, and he would wake up every morning at 3:15 a.m., the approximate time of the DeFeo murders, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The children also suffered. The youngest, Missy, developed an imaginary friend named Jody, whom she described as a red-eyed, pig-like creature that could change shape. One night, George claimed to have seen Jody's glowing red eyes staring at him from outside the window. The activity escalated from strange occurrences to outright physical phenomena. A crucifix on the wall allegedly rotated until it was upside down. A locked door was ripped from its hinges. A hidden, small room painted blood red was discovered in the basement, a room that did not appear on the house's blueprints. The family heard phantom marching bands and disembodied voices. The climax came on their 28th and final night. The family described a terrifying cacophony of sounds, of furniture moving on its own, of unseen forces shaking the very foundations of the house. Fearing for their lives, they grabbed only what they were wearing and fled in the middle of the night, never to return. Their story, as told to author Jay Anson, became the 1977 best-selling book, The Amityville Horror, and later, a blockbuster film. The book presented their 28 days as a factual account of demonic infestation. It introduced the idea that the house was built on a Shinnecock Indian burial ground, and that a local man, John Ketchum, a practicing devil worshipper, had once lived on the land, creating a conduit for evil. The story of the Amityville Horror became a cultural phenomenon. It perfectly blended true crime with supernatural terror, creating a narrative that felt chillingly plausible. But almost as soon as the story became famous, it began to fall apart. Skeptics and investigators started pointing out inconsistencies. There was no historical evidence of a Shinnecock burial ground at that location, nor of a devil worshipper named John Ketchum. The priest, Father Pecoraro, gave conflicting accounts of his experience to different people. And then came the bombshell. Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s lawyer, William Weber, came forward and claimed that he, along with the Lutzes, had invented the entire story over several bottles of wine. He said they took the basic facts of the DeFeo murders and embellished them, hoping to create a lucrative book deal that could potentially help with an appeal for DeFeo. He called it a hoax. The Lutzes, for their part, stuck to their story for the rest of their lives, even passing lie detector tests. They sued Weber for his claims and maintained that their experience was real and that they had been traumatized by it. This created a deep and lasting divide. Believers point to the family's apparent sincerity and the corroboration of some elements by paranormal investigators like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who investigated the house and claimed it was one of the most terrifying cases they had ever encountered. Lorraine Warren famously said she felt a demonic presence so powerful she refused to ever enter the house again. Skeptics, however, point to the lack of any physical evidence, the financial motives, and the fact that every family who has lived in the house since the Lutzes has reported absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. The iconic eye windows have been changed, the address has been altered to discourage tourists, and the house on Ocean Avenue is now just a home once again. So what is the truth of the Amityville Horror? Was 112 Ocean Avenue a gateway to hell, a place so corrupted by a horrific crime that it became a beacon for demonic forces? Were the Lutzes truly tormented by paranormal entities for 28 days? Or were they a family in financial trouble who, with the help of a clever lawyer, concocted an elaborate ghost story based on a real-life tragedy. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the murky middle. It's possible the family did experience some unsettling, unexplained phenomena. The psychological residue of a mass murder could certainly create a disturbing atmosphere. And perhaps, under stress and the power of suggestion, those small events were magnified and woven into the terrifying narrative we know today. The Amityville Horror remains one of the most debated paranormal stories in history, a perfect storm of true crime, supernatural claims, and media sensationalism, leaving us with a haunting question. Where does the real horror end and the story begin? From the East Coast, our journey now takes us across the country to San Jose, California, to a house that is not famous for a single violent event, but for a slow, creeping madness that manifested in wood, nails, and a labyrinth of architectural chaos. This is not a house of demonic entities or vengeful ghosts in the traditional sense. This is a house haunted by grief, obsession, and the crushing weight of a guilty conscience. Welcome to the Winchester Mystery House. The story of this bizarre mansion is inextricably linked to one woman, Sarah Winchester, the heiress to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company fortune. In 1862, Sarah married William Wirt Winchester, the son of the company's founder. They were a wealthy and loving couple, and a few years later, they had a daughter named Annie. But their happiness was tragically short-lived. Little Annie died just a few weeks after her birth from a childhood illness. The loss devastated Sarah, and it was a grief from which she would never truly recover. 15 years later, tragedy struck again when her husband, William, died of tuberculosis. Suddenly, Sarah Winchester was a widow, alone, and one of the wealthiest women in the world. She inherited a fortune of over $20 million, an astronomical sum in the late 19th century, plus a 50% stake in the Winchester Company, which gave her a daily income of about $1,000. That's the equivalent of over $30,000 a day in today's money. But the money brought her no comfort. It was, in her eyes, blood money. The Winchester rifle was known as the gun that won the West. And Sarah became increasingly tormented by the thought that her family's fortune was built on the deaths of countless people, soldiers, Native Americans, and others who had fallen victim to her family's invention. Consumed by grief and guilt, Sarah sought the advice of a spiritualist medium in Boston. The story goes that the medium channeled the spirit of her late husband, William, who delivered a chilling message. He claimed that the Winchester family was cursed, haunted by the spirits of everyone killed by their rifles. These angry spirits were the cause of her daughter's and husband's deaths, and now they were coming for her. The only way to appease them, the spirit allegedly said, was to move west and build a great house for them. But there was a catch. She could never, ever stop building. As long as the sound of hammers echoed on the property, her life would be spared. Taking the medium's warning to heart, Sarah packed her bags and moved to the Santa Clara Valley in California in 1886. She purchased a small, unfinished farmhouse and a vast tract of land. And then the construction began. It did not stop for 38 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, until the very day of her death. What resulted is not so much a house as it is a sprawling architectural enigma. The Winchester Mystery House is a monument to obsession. Sarah hired teams of carpenters who worked in shifts around the clock. She had no master blueprint. It's said that each night she would retreat to her private seance room to communicate with the spirits who would give her the building instructions for the next day. The designs were often chaotic, nonsensical, and deliberately confusing, intended to baffle the malevolent spirits she believed were pursuing her. The numbers alone are staggering. The house sprawls over 6 acres and contains 160 rooms, including 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 window panes, 17 chimneys, and 2,000 doors. But it's the bizarre features that truly define the house's strangeness. There are staircases that lead directly into the ceiling, doors that open onto solid walls, or worse, onto a 2-story drop to the garden below, a cabinet that is only 1 inch deep, A grand staircase with 44 steps that only rises 9 feet, each step being only 2 inches high, supposedly to accommodate Sarah's debilitating arthritis in her later years. There are secret passageways, windows in the floor, and a recurring spiderweb motif, a favorite design of Sarah's, found throughout the house in stained glass and engravings. The number 13 is also a recurring theme. Many windows have 13 panes. There are 13 bathrooms, the 13th of which has 13 windows. There are stairways with 13 steps and 13 domes in the conservatory. This obsession with the number 13 is believed to have been part of her spiritualist practices. Life inside the house was as strange as its construction. Sarah was intensely private and reclusive. She wore a dark veil at all times to hide her face from both the living and the dead. She slept in a different one of the 40 bedrooms each night to confuse any spirits that might be looking for her. She was a ghost in her own ever-expanding home. The paranormal stories associated with the Winchester Mystery House are, unsurprisingly, numerous. For decades, visitors and staff have reported a wide range of unexplained phenomena. Disembodied footsteps are heard echoing down empty hallways, believed to belong to the spectral carpenters still on the job. Doors are known to slam shut on their own, and doorknobs turn by unseen hands. Cold spots are felt throughout the mansion, and many people report feeling a sudden, overwhelming sense of sadness in certain rooms, particularly in the bedroom where Sarah herself passed away. The most prominent apparition is said to be that of Sarah Winchester herself. She has been seen as a small, fleeting figure in black, gliding through the halls she so meticulously and bizarrely designed. Another frequently reported ghost is a man with a thick black mustache, believed to be one of her loyal carpenters still pushing a spectral wheelbarrow through the basement. People have heard disembodied whispers, seen lights flicker on and off, and felt the distinct sensation of being tapped on the shoulder or having their clothes tugged when no one is there. It's a classic destination for ghost adventures, with paranormal teams regularly capturing strange audio phenomena and fleeting shadows on camera. But like all great paranormal stories, the tale of Sarah Winchester has its skeptics. Modern historians have begun to challenge the traditional narrative. Was Sarah really a guilt-ridden spiritualist, or was she something else entirely? Some researchers suggest she was actually a brilliant, self-taught architect and a shrewd businesswoman who used her immense fortune to engage in a massive, continuous social experiment. The constant construction was a form of philanthropy, providing steady, well-paying jobs to local craftsmen for decades. In an era with no social safety nets, she created a one-woman stimulus package for the local economy. The strange architectural features might not have been to confuse ghosts, but were simply the result of an amateur designer with unlimited funds and a lack of formal training, constantly experimenting with new ideas. The strange additions could also be explained by the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which heavily damaged the house, leading to sections being boarded up and new, sometimes awkward, wings being built around the destruction. The story of the Boston medium has also been questioned, as there is no first-hand account from Sarah herself, only second-hand reports that surfaced long after her death. Perhaps the truth is a combination of both narratives. She could have been a brilliant and philanthropic woman who was also deeply scarred by grief and drawn to the comfort and structure that spiritualism and its rituals provided. Her endless construction project could have been both a way to employ her community and a deeply personal, therapeutic act, a way to channel her sorrow into something tangible, a physical manifestation of her restless mind. Whether a prison designed to trap ghosts or a monument to one woman's profound grief and eccentricity, the Winchester Mystery House remains a powerful and unsettling place. It's a house that feels alive, a wooden labyrinth that seems to shift and breathe around you. It asks us if a haunting requires a violent death, or if the sheer, focused weight of one person's lifelong obsession can be enough to leave a permanent psychic scar on a location. The Hammers have been silent for a century, but the echo of Sarah Winchester's strange and sorrowful project still resonates within its walls. For our final stop, we leave the sprawling chaos of the Winchester Mansion and travel to the heart of the American Midwest, to a small, unassuming white house in Villisca, Iowa. This house is not known for its architecture or for a famous family. It's known for one single night of unimaginable brutality, a crime so horrific and so baffling that it left a permanent stain on the town and gave birth to one of America's most active and disturbing paranormal locations. This is the Villisca Axe Murder House. The story begins on the morning of June 10, 1912. A neighbor, concerned that the home of the respected Moore family was unusually quiet, went to check on them. When no one answered his knock, he contacted the town marshal. What they discovered inside would haunt the town of Villisca forever. In the upstairs bedrooms, they found the bodies of all 4 members of the Moore family: Josiah, Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, along with 2 young girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, who were friends of the family and had stayed over for the night. All 8 people had been bludgeoned to death with an axe as they slept. The crime scene was both brutal and bizarre. Each victim's head had been crushed by the blunt side of an axe belonging to Josiah Moore, which was found at the scene, bloody but wiped clean of fingerprints. The killer had then covered the faces of every victim with clothing or bedsheets. They had also covered all the mirrors and glass in the house with cloth. A plate of uneaten food and a bowl of bloody water were found in the kitchen, suggesting the killer had washed their hands before leaving. Strangest of all, 2-pound slabs of bacon were found leaning against the walls in the rooms of the parents and the visiting Stillinger girls. The doors were locked from the inside and the curtains were drawn. The killer, or killers, had taken their time, moving through the house with a chilling precision, and then vanished into the night without a trace. The town of Villisca, with a population of only 2,000, was thrown into a state of panic and paranoia. Everyone was a suspect. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The investigation was chaotic from the start. In the initial hours, dozens, if not hundreds, of townspeople trampled through the crime scene, contaminating any potential evidence. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in failure, plagued by shoddy police work, rampant rumors, and a slew of suspects who were investigated and, in some cases, tried but never definitively convicted. Several key suspects emerged. There was Frank Jones, a powerful Iowa state senator and a business rival of Josiah Moore, who had allegedly hired a hitman named William Blackie Mansfield to carry out the murders. There was also Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher who was in town at the time of the murders. Kelly was a strange and unsettling man who confessed to the crimes years later, only to recant his confession. He was tried twice, but the first trial ended in a hung jury and the second in an acquittal. Another theory pointed to a potential serial killer, Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the victims, who was convicted of murdering his mother and grandmother with an axe months after the Villisca crime in a chillingly similar fashion. Despite these and other theories, the case officially remains unsolved to this day. No one was ever held accountable for the slaughter of 8 people, 6 of them children. The house where the murders took place became a pariah. For decades, it passed through different owners, but no one stayed long. It was a place of deep, lingering sorrow. But over time, the sorrow began to manifest as something else. Residents and visitors began reporting strange and deeply unsettling paranormal activity, leading many to believe that the spirits of the Moore family and the Stillinger girls were still trapped inside, reliving the terror of their final moments. The paranormal stories from the Villisca Axe Murder House are profoundly sad and deeply frightening. The most common reports are the sounds of children. Visitors on overnight paranormal tours often report hearing the distinct sounds of children's voices whispering or giggling in the empty rooms. Sometimes, they hear the sound of a ball bouncing or marbles rolling across the wooden floors of the attic. The children's bedroom is considered the epicenter of this activity. People have left toys out, only to return and find them moved to different locations. Some have even captured electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, that sound like children's voices, with some recordings allegedly capturing a child saying, "I'm hurt," or asking, "Where's my mommy?" But the activity is not limited to the sounds of children. there are also darker, more menacing phenomena. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere is said to descend upon the house, particularly after dark. A phantom figure of a man with an axe has been seen standing in the doorways, a fleeting shadow in the corner of your eye. The sound of the axe being sharpened has reportedly been heard coming from the barn. In the parents' bedroom, where Josiah and Sarah were killed, visitors report feeling an intense, hostile energy. Objects have been known to fly off shelves, doors slam shut with violent force, and some people have even reported being pushed, scratched, or pinched by an unseen entity. One paranormal investigator was famously stabbed in the chest by an unknown force during an overnight stay, an event that was recorded on audio. The Villisca House forces a different kind of ghost adventure. It's not about jump scares, it's about a pervasive, gut-wrenching sadness mixed with a palpable sense of menace. It raises the question of what kind of energy an unsolved, brutal crime leaves behind. Are the spirits of the children trying to communicate, to tell their story, or simply playing as they did in life? And is the darker energy the residual rage and pain of the adult victims, or is it something else? Is it the spirit of the killer, forever tied to the scene of their heinous act? Or has the house itself, by virtue of the horror it witnessed, become a malevolent entity in its own right? In 1994, the house was purchased and restored to its 1912 condition. It was then opened to the public for historical tours and for the truly brave overnight stays. It has become a pilgrimage site for paranormal enthusiasts and historians alike, a place where the chilling silence of an unanswered question is almost deafening. The Villisca Axe murder house is a stark and terrifying reminder that sometimes the most frightening ghosts aren't the ones that rattle chains or moan in the night, but the ones born from real-world violence and the profound injustice of a mystery that may never be solved. So here we stand at the end of our journey. We've walked the elegant, blood-stained halls of the LaLaurie mansion. We've felt the palpable dread of 112 Ocean Avenue. We've navigated the maddening corridors of the Winchester Mystery House, and we've listened for the phantom whispers of children in the silence of Villisca. For houses, for very different stories, yet they are all bound by a common thread, tragedy. Whether it's the horror of sadistic cruelty, the brutality of a family massacre, the slow burn of profound grief, or the chilling mystery of an unsolved crime, each of these haunted houses is built on a foundation of human suffering. And this brings us back to our central question. What are we truly encountering in these places? Are these locations genuinely inhabited by the conscious spirits of the dead, forever tethered to the site of their trauma? Is Madame LaLaurie still stalking her mansion in a rage? Are the Lutz family's experiences a true account of demonic forces awakened by the DeFeo murders? Is Sarah Winchester still directing her spectral carpenters? And are the children of Villisca still waiting for justice? Or is there another possibility? Could it be that these structures act as psychic batteries? That the intense emotion and energy of these tragic events have been absorbed into the very walls, the floorboards, the air itself, creating a kind of residual echo that plays back for sensitive individuals? A psychic stain that can never be fully washed away. And then there is the power of our own minds. These are not just any old houses, they are places that have been preloaded with terrifying narratives. We enter them knowing their dark histories. We are primed to be scared. Every creak of a floorboard, every cold draft, every shadow in our peripheral vision is instantly interpreted through the lens of the horror story we've already been told. How much of the experience is genuinely paranormal and how much is our own psychology, our own fear, filling in the blanks? Perhaps the truth is not a single answer, but a complex tapestry woven from all these threads. Perhaps some of these paranormal stories are exaggerated. Perhaps some phenomena are easily explained. But maybe, just maybe, some of them are not. Maybe, in the quietest, darkest moments, in that chill that runs down your spine, we are truly brushing up against something that lies just beyond the veil of our understanding. The enduring fascination with these haunted houses tells us something profound about ourselves. We are drawn to these stories not just for the thrill of being scared, but because they touch upon our deepest existential questions about life, death, justice, and the possibility of something more. They are modern-day campfires around which we gather to share tales that explore the darkest corners of human experience and the enduring mystery of what comes next. These 4 houses stand as dark mirrors, reflecting our own mortality and the capacity for both great cruelty and profound sorrow. They remind us that while we build homes to feel safe, the most terrifying horrors are often the ones that come from within, from the human heart, and the ghosts it leaves behind. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think is happening in these infamous locations? Are you a believer in the paranormal, a hardened skeptic, or somewhere in between? Which of these 4 haunted houses do you find the most terrifying, and why? Let me know your theories and your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever had your own unexplained experience or a personal ghost adventure, I'd love to hear about it. If you found this deep dive into America's most chilling paranormal stories as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We have so many more uncharted mysteries to explore together. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark. Stay curious and perhaps check your locks.